A Mafia boss noticed a little girl arrange her silverware into an X and drop her napkin twice. It was a distress signal only cops used decades ago, the same one his late detective friend had taught him. What he didn't know was that saving her would force him to choose between his empire and the man he promised to become. Adrian Moretti had seen death wear many faces. Tonight, it wore the smile of a man cutting his daughter's steak. The rain hammered against the tall windows of Vittorio's, the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where politicians shook hands with criminals and everyone pretended not to notice. Adrian sat in his usual corner booth, half listening to his lieutenant, Marco, drone on about territory disputes and protection money. The candlelight made shadows dance across the white tablecloth, and Adrian found himself watching them instead of caring about the numbers. He was tired, bone deep, soul-sick tired. "Boss, you hearing me?" Marco asked, his thick eyebrows knitting together. "Every word," Adrian lied, bringing his wine glass to his lips. "The Chianti tasted like old pennies tonight. Everything did lately." That's when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting 3 tables away. Dark hair pulled into 2 neat braids. A yellow dress with white flowers that looked too new, too perfect. She sat between a man and a woman, both well-dressed, both smiling. The perfect family portrait. Except the girl wasn't smiling. She was arranging her silverware. Adrian's hand froze halfway to setting down his glass. He watched as the child's small fingers carefully positioned her fork and spoon into a deliberate X shape on the white tablecloth. Then, as if by accident, she knocked her napkin to the floor. The woman picked it up, placed it back on the girl's lap. 10 seconds later, the napkin fell again. Same spot. Same gentle tumble to the carpet. Adrian's heart began to pound in a way it hadn't in 15 years. "Boss." Marco leaned forward, concern creasing his weathered face. "Shut up," Adrian whispered, his eyes never leaving the child. The girl's hands were trembling now. She reached for her water glass, and the man beside her, sharp suit, slicked back hair, smile like polished steel, placed his hand over hers. Gentle from a distance, but Adrian saw the way the girl's face paled, saw the pressure in the man's fingers. The X, the double drop, the rhythm. It was a distress signal. Not just any distress signal, it was the signal. The one used by undercover agents in the 90s. The one that had been phased out of official use 20 years ago. The one that only old-school cops and their contacts still remembered. The one Detective James Harris had taught Adrian on a cold night in 1998, when Adrian had been running guns and Harris had been the only honest cop in a corrupt precinct. "You're young, Moretti," Harris had said, sharing a cigarette in an alley while sirens wailed blocks away. "You're going to see things. Dark things. And someday, you might see someone who needs help but can't ask for it. So I'm teaching you this signal. Not for me. For them." Adrian had laughed back then. Said he'd never need it. Said he wasn't a hero. Harris had just smiled sadly. Nobody thinks they are. Until they have to be. Now, watching this little girl with her trembling hands and her too perfect family, Adrian felt that old conversation rise up like a ghost. The man in the sharp suit called for the check. The woman, blonde, expensive jewelry, predator's eyes, dabbed her mouth with her napkin and stood. The girl didn't move until the man squeezed her shoulder. Hard enough that she flinched. They were leaving. Adrian dropped $200 bills on the table without counting. "Stay here," he told Marco.
"What?"
"Boss, where are you?" But Adrian was already moving, his 6-foot frame cutting through the restaurant like a knife through silk. He didn't run, didn't draw attention, just walked with the purposeful stride of a man who knew exactly where he was going. Outside, the rain was a curtain of silver needles. The couple's black Mercedes was already pulling away from the curb, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. Adrian caught one last glimpse of the girl's face in the rear window, pale, pressed against the glass, eyes wide. Looking right at him. She mouthed something. One word. He couldn't hear it through the rain and glass, but he could read her lips. Help. Then they were gone, red taillights dissolving into the storm. Adrian stood there, rain soaking through his $5,000 suit, and made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and dialed. The voice that answered was gruff, suspicious. Moretti? It's 11 at night. I need a favor, Detective Chen. Adrian kept his eyes on the direction the Mercedes had gone. Missing persons database. I need you to search for a girl. 8 years old. Dark hair, brown eyes. That's half the missing kids in the state. You got anything else? Adrian closed his eyes and saw the ghost of James Harris standing in that alley 27 years ago, teaching him a signal that would haunt them both. Yeah, Adrian said quietly. Her last name might be Harris. First name possibly Lily. The silence on the other end stretched like a wire pulled tight. Jesus Christ, Chen finally whispered. Harris's daughter? Adrian, she's been missing for 4 months. The case went cold in 6 weeks. How do you? I just saw her. Adrian opened his eyes, and the city looked different now. Sharper. Clearer. Like he'd been sleepwalking through life and had suddenly, violently woken up. And I'm going to bring her home. He hung up before Chen could argue, before he could talk him out of it, before reality could set in. Because Adrian Moretti knew 3 things with absolute certainty. 1. That little girl had just used a signal only James Harris would have taught her. 2. James Harris had died 3 years ago, shot in the line of duty, and his daughter had been taken from her grandmother's care 4 months later under suspicious circumstances. And 3. Adrian owed James Harris a debt that had been sitting on his soul like a stone for 15 years. Tonight, in the rain, watching those taillights fade, Adrian decided it was time to pay it. Even if it killed him. Adrian's Audi pulled away from the curb 30 seconds after the Mercedes disappeared into traffic. He kept his distance, 3 cars back, never closer. The rain was his ally tonight, blurring license plates and obscuring faces. Nobody would remember a dark sedan in a storm. The couple drove carefully. Too carefully. They signaled every turn. Stopped fully, at every sign. Obeyed every speed limit like model citizens. But they avoided the main highways, threading instead through back streets and industrial zones where traffic cameras were sparse and witnesses were scarce. Adrian's jaw tightened. These weren't amateurs. His phone buzzed. Marco's name flashed on the screen. He ignored it. Whatever business needed handling could wait. For the first time in a decade, Adrian Moretti was choosing something over the family business. The Mercedes turned onto Riverside Avenue, then cut through the old warehouse district. Adrian knew this area. His organization had owned half these buildings until the city rezoning pushed them out. Now it was all trendy lofts and organic cafes, the kind of neighborhood where people paid premium prices to live in converted factories and pretend they were pioneers. Perfect cover for people who wanted to disappear in plain sight. The Mercedes finally slowed in front of a narrow Victorian townhouse, painted cream with dark shutters. Flowers in the window boxes. A child's bicycle on the porch. Everything screamed normal, happy family. Adrian parked 2 blocks away and killed his engine. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he watched the man open the car door and extend his hand. The girl, Lily, climbed out slowly, like every movement required permission. The woman walked ahead, heels clicking on wet pavement, already unlocking the front door. The man's hand never left Lily's shoulder. They disappeared inside. Lights flicked on in the ground floor windows, warm and welcoming. Then a second-floor light, a bedroom, maybe. Adrian caught a glimpse of Lily's pale face appearing at the window before curtains snapped shut. He sat in the darkness, engine ticking as it cooled, and pulled up everything he knew about James Harris. They'd met during Adrian's wild years, when he was 23 and stupid enough to think running guns made him powerful. Harris had been the detective who'd caught him with a trunk full of unmarked weapons and a future measured in decades behind bars. But Harris had been different. Tired eyes that had seen too much. A wedding ring he twisted when he was thinking. He'd sat across from Adrian in that interrogation room and said, "You're going to get one chance in your life to choose who you become. This is it." Then he'd lost the paperwork. Accidentally, he claimed. The evidence vanished. The case evaporated. Why? Adrian had asked, standing in the precinct parking lot as a free man. "Because I've put away enough people to know the difference between evil and stupid," Harris had said. "You're just stupid. Don't make me regret this." Adrian hadn't. He'd gone legitimate. Well, as legitimate as a man with his connections could go. Built an empire on protection, gambling, and influence instead of violence. Kept his word. Honored his debts. And when Harris had died in a shootout 3 years ago, Adrian had sent flowers to the funeral anonymously and told himself that his debt had died with the detective.
But debts don't die.
They just wait. Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time it was Detective Chin calling back. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Chin said without preamble. Lily Harris, 8 years old. Mother died in childbirth. Raised by her father until his death, then went to live with her grandmother, Eleanor Harris. 4 months ago, a couple named David and Susan Reeves showed up with emergency foster care papers. Everything looked legitimate: judge's signature, social services approval. The grandmother fought it, but she's 76 and had a stroke last year. Systems said she wasn't fit. "Let me guess," Adrian said quietly. The case file went cold, like ice. Social services says the placement is fine. The Reeveses send regular reports. Photos of Lily smiling at birthday parties, playing in parks. Everything by the book. Except she's signaling for help in restaurants. Except that, Chun agreed grimly. "Adrian, if you're right about this, if they're holding her, you need to bring this to us. Officially. You've had 4 months. We've had our hands tied by paperwork and procedure. You know how the system works." "Yeah," Adrian said, watching raindrops race down his windshield. "That's exactly why I'm not waiting for it." He hung up and made another call. This one to Rosa Delgado, who ran a cafe near the old precinct and had been Eleanor Harris's best friend for 40 years. "Adrian Moretti," Rosa said when she answered. "Didn't expect to hear from you. Especially not at midnight. I need to talk about Lily Harris." The silence that followed was heavy with old grief. When Rosa finally spoke, her voice cracked. "What about her?" "I know where she is, and I'm going to bring her home." Adrian didn't go home that night. Instead, he drove to his private study, a converted loft above an old bookstore in the financial district. The place only 3 people knew about. Now it was down to 2, since Harris was dead. The room smelled of leather and old paper. Adrian poured himself a whiskey, then stared at the amber liquid for a long moment before setting it down untouched. He needed clarity tonight, not comfort. The photograph sat where it always had, in a silver frame on the shelf between legal books and folders he'd never open. 2 men, younger, standing outside a courthouse. James Harris in his detective's badge, Adrian in a suit too expensive for a 23-year-old to afford honestly. Before and after, Harris had joked when someone took the picture. "Before you were smart, after you got lucky, I gave a damn." Adrian picked up the frame now, studying Harris's face. The detective had been 40 then, already going gray at the temples, already carrying the weight of a city that chewed up good men and spit out cynics. But his eyes had been kind. Tired, but kind. "I should have checked on her," Adrian whispered to the photograph. "After you died. I should have made sure she was okay." But he hadn't. He'd sent flowers and told himself that staying away was the right thing to do. That a child didn't need a mafia boss haunting her life. That Harris would have wanted her far from Adrian's world. Now that world had found her anyway. His phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. "Can you meet tomorrow?"
9 Uhr morgens.
"My cafe. I have information." Adrian texted back a confirmation, then sat in his chair and let the memories flood back. The night Harris had saved his life, it hadn't been just about the guns. There had been another player, a detective named Kozlov who'd wanted Adrian dead. Easier than a trial. Cleaner than testimony. Kozlov had cornered Adrian in an abandoned factory, gun drawn, ready to make it look like self-defense. Harris had appeared like a ghost in the doorway. "Put it down, Kozlov. This punk's dirty. He's moving weapons for the Volkov crew. Then we arrest him. We don't execute him." The standoff had lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it had felt like hours. Finally, Kozlov had holstered his weapon and walked away, fury in every step. Harris had turned to Adrian. "You're going to run now. And you're going to stay far away from Kozlov and anyone like him. Understand? Why are you doing this?" Adrian had asked. Harris had looked at him with those tired, kind eyes. "I've got a daughter. She's 5. And every time I look at you, I see someone's son. Someone's future. Maybe I can't save everyone, but I can save you. Don't make me wrong." Adrian hadn't. He'd rebuilt himself, brick by brick, into someone Harris wouldn't regret saving. But Kozlov hadn't forgotten. 2 years later, Harris had been investigating a trafficking ring. The shootout that killed him had officially been ruled a gang ambush. But Adrian had heard whispers. Kozlov's name, mentioned in dark corners. A debt settled. A loose end tied. Harris had died because he'd been the kind of cop who couldn't be bought or scared. The kind who actually protected people. And now his daughter was being held by people who smiled in restaurants and filed perfect paperwork while a little girl trembled and made distress signals with her silverware. Adrian's hands curled into fists. There was a knock at the door, 3 short raps. Marco's signal. "Come in," Adrian called. His lieutenant entered, looking worried. "Boss, you disappeared. The Calabrese meeting. Reschedule it."
What?
"That's 3 weeks of negotiation. If we don't show..." "I said reschedule it, Marco." Adrian's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. Marco stopped. He'd known Adrian for 12 years, and he knew that tone. "What's going on?" "You remember Detective Harris? The cop who let you walk?" "Yeah, I remember. Heard he got killed few years back. His daughter's been taken. Foster care scam, looks like." "But it's darker than that." Adrian stood, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, a million lights hiding a million secrets. "I'm going to get her back." "Boss, we don't do rescue missions." I'm not asking the family to do it. I'm doing it myself." Marco was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're calling in the debt." "I'm paying one." Adrian turned from the window. "Harris saved my life. Gave me a chance to be something better than a street thug with a gun. His daughter is out there right now, scared and alone, and the system that's supposed to protect her is failing. I'm not going to fail her too. This could get messy." Then it gets messy. Adrian picked up the photograph, looking one more time at Harris's kind, tired eyes. "Get me everything on David and Susan Reeves. Financials, associates, properties. Everything. And keep it quiet."
Marco nodded slowly.
"How quiet?" "Dead quiet. This doesn't touch the family business. This is personal." After Marco left, Adrian stood alone in his study, the weight of an old promise settling on his shoulders like a familiar coat. "I'm coming for her, old friend," he whispered. "I just hope I'm not too late." Rosa Delgado's cafe sat on a corner that time had forgotten. The neighborhood had gentrified around it, but Rosa had refused every buyout offer, every developer's promise of fair market value. The hand-painted signs still read, "Rosa's Kitchen," in fading letters, and the coffee still cost $2 when everywhere else charged $6. Adrian arrived at 9 sharp. Rosa was waiting in a back booth, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her dark eyes sharp as ever. A manila folder sat on the table between them. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Didn't sleep." Adrian slid into the booth across from her. "Tell me about Lily." Rosa's expression darkened. "That poor child. Eleanor, her grandmother, she called me the day they took her. She was hysterical. Said 2 people showed up with papers, a social worker, even a police officer. Everything official. But Eleanor knew something was wrong. She felt it in her bones." "What happened?" "She tried to fight it. got a lawyer, but he was fresh out of law school and didn't know how to navigate the system. By the time she found someone competent, the Reeveses had already moved Lily to an undisclosed location for her safety. That's what the paperwork said. Eleanor had a stroke 2 weeks later. She's in a nursing home now, barely speaks. Adrian's jaw tightened. The Reeveses. What do we know about them? Rosa opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of documents, foster care licenses, tax returns, photographs. On paper, they're saints. David Reeves is a financial consultant. Susan Reeves volunteers at 3 different charities. They've fostered 4 children in the past 6 years. All the placements ended successfully, meaning the children were either returned to family or adopted out. Or disappeared, Adrian said quietly. Rosa met his eyes. That's what Eleanor thought. She started digging before the stroke. Found something that scared her enough to tell me to hide these documents. She pushed the folder toward him. The charity Susan volunteers for? It's called New Beginnings Foundation. Helps place at-risk children with loving families. Adrian flipped through the papers. New Beginnings had an impressive board of directors, glowing testimonials, and a headquarters in a renovated church downtown. Everything looked legitimate. Too legitimate. I had Marco do some digging last night, Adrian said. New Beginnings Foundation processes about 200 placements a year. That's 4 times the rate of comparable organizations. And their international adoption program? It operates in countries with notoriously corrupt child welfare systems. Rosa's face went pale. You think they're selling children? I think they're moving children. Whether it's for adoption fees, labor, or something worse. Adrian stopped, not wanting to voice the darker possibilities. The point is, Lily isn't their first. And she won't be their last unless we stop them.
We.
Rosa raised an eyebrow. Adrian, I run a cafe. What am I supposed to do? You knew Eleanor. You knew James. That makes you trustworthy, and trust is the only currency that matters right now. He leaned forward. I need someone the Reeveses won't recognize. Someone who can get close to Lily without raising alarms. You want me to spy on them? I want you to help save a little girl. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee with a spoon that had seen better decades. Finally, she said, James Harris was a good man. One of the best I ever knew. And that little girl, her voice cracked. She used to come here with her daddy every Sunday morning. She'd order hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and draw pictures on napkins. She drew one of me once, gave it to me like it was a Picasso. I still have it. Then helped me bring her home.
Rosa nodded slowly.
What do you need? Over the next 20 minutes, Adrian laid out what Marco had discovered. New Beginnings Foundation operated through a network of placement coordinators, people like the Reeveses who identified vulnerable children and expedited their removal from difficult situations. The foundation paid well, offered legal protection, and had connections that reached into family courts, social services, and law enforcement. They've built a machine, Adrian said grimly, and it's running on children nobody misses. Foster kids, children of dead parents, anyone without a strong support network. How do we break it? Carefully. If we go in loud, they'll scatter. Move their operation, destroy evidence, maybe even. He couldn't finish the sentence, but Rosa understood. If the foundation felt threatened, the children in their network would become liabilities. So we need proof, Rosa said. Evidence of what they're really doing. And we need Lily safe first. Before we burn everything down, she needs to be somewhere they can't reach her. Rosa pulled out her phone. I volunteer at St. Catherine's Church. They run a legitimate foster care support group. I could reach out to the Reeveses, say I want to interview successful foster families for a community newsletter. It's small enough not to seem threatening, but it gets me in the door. Adrian felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Hope. They'll vet you. Let them. I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. I'm exactly who I say I am. Rosa smiled grimly. Besides, I make excellent tres leches cake. Nobody suspects a woman bearing dessert. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. His phone buzzed. A text from Marco. We have a problem. Someone's asking questions about you and the Harris girl. Word is spreading. Adrian showed Rosa the message. Her expression hardened. Looks like we're not the only ones interested in Lily, she said. Then we move fast, Adrian stood. Make contact with the Reeveses today. I'll handle whoever's asking questions. As he walked out of Rosa's cafe into the bright morning sun, Adrian felt the weight of what he'd started settling over him. He'd crossed a line last night, following that Mercedes through the rain. Now, there was no going back. Somewhere in this city, a little girl was waiting for help. And somewhere else, people who trafficked in children were realizing that Adrian Moretti had become a threat. The war had begun, even if only one side knew it yet. Adrian returned to his penthouse at noon to find his front door unlocked. He froze in the hallway, every instinct screaming danger. The door was heavy steel with a biometric lock. There were maybe 5 people in the city with the skill to bypass it quietly. None of them were friendly. His hand moved to the gun at the small of his back as he pushed the door open slowly. The penthouse looked untouched. Afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating his minimalist furniture and expensive art. Everything exactly as he'd left it, except for the envelope on his dining table. It sat centered on the glass surface like a chess piece deliberately placed. Cream-colored. No writing on the outside. Adrian approached it carefully, checking corners and shadows. Whoever had been here was long gone, but they'd wanted to make a point. Breaking into Adrian Moretti's home wasn't just bold, it was a declaration. He pulled on gloves before opening the envelope. Inside was a single photograph printed on glossy paper. It showed him at Vittorio's restaurant last night, leaning forward in his booth, watching something off-camera. The angle was from across the dining room. Professional quality.
Délibérate composition.
Beneath the photo, 5 words written in precise block letters. Stay out of this, Moretti.
No signature.
No threat. None needed. Adrian's phone rang. His consigliere, Vincent Romano. The old man's voice was tight with worry. Adrian, we need to talk.
Now.
My place. It's already been compromised. I know. That's why we need to talk. Vincent arrived 15 minutes later with Marco and 2 other senior members, Tony Castellano and Michael Fish Pisano. The fact that Vincent had brought the inner circle meant this was serious. They gathered around Adrian's table, all of them eyeing the photograph like it was a bomb. Who delivered it? Vincent asked. He was 70, gray-haired, and sharp as a razor despite his age. Don't know yet. Building security footage will tell us, but I'm guessing they were smart enough to avoid cameras. Adrian crossed his arms. Anyone want to tell me who I've pissed off? Vincent exchanged glances with the others. We've been making calls all morning. Word on the street is that New Beginnings Foundation isn't just some charity front. It's connected to the Kovalenko network. Adrian's blood went cold. The Kovalenkos were old-school Russian mafia, trafficking, extortion, contract killing. They'd been trying to expand into the city for years, but Adrian's organization had kept them contained to the docks and industrial zones. Kozlov, Adrian said quietly.
What?
Marco looked confused. Detective Sergei Kozlov. He tried to kill me 27 years ago. Harris stopped him. Kozlov was dirty even then. Everyone knew it. No one could prove it. He retired from the force 8 years ago. Adrian picked up the photograph. I'd bet my empire he's working for the Kovalenkos now. Vincent nodded grimly.
He is.
He runs their consultation division, which means he's the one who handles their interaction with law enforcement and social services. Bribes, blackmail, paperwork manipulation. If New Beginnings is connected to them, Kozlov's the bridge. So Harris's daughter ends up in a trafficking network run by the man who wanted Harris dead. Adrian's voice was quiet, but fury burned beneath it. That's not coincidence. No, Vincent agreed. It's revenge. Kozlov probably tracked Harris's family after his death. Waited for an opportunity. When the grandmother showed vulnerability, he moved. This isn't just business, Adrian. This is personal for him too. Fish leaned forward, his scarred knuckles resting on the table. Boss, if the Kovalenkos know you're sniffing around their operation, they're going to push back hard. We talking war here. I'm not asking the family to go to war, Adrian said. The hell you're not, Tony interjected. You break into their network, you rescue that kid, they're going to retaliate. Against all of us. Then I do it alone. The room erupted. All four men talking over each other, arguing, protesting. Vincent finally slammed his hand on the table, silencing them. Adrian, the old man said carefully, we've built something here. 20 years of keeping the peace, maintaining balance, staying out of the dirt that drowns other organizations. You want to throw that away for one child? Yes. The simplicity of Adrian's answer stopped them all. He looked at each of them in turn. James Harris saved my life when he had every reason to let me die. He gave me a chance to become something more than a street thug. Everything we've built, this empire, this respect, this peace, it exists because one man believed I could be better. He picked up the photograph. His daughter is being held by animals who traffic children. The same animals who probably had her father killed. And they just broke into my home to threaten me. So this is about ego now? Marco asked carefully. This is about who we are. Adrian's voice was steel. We've spent 20 years telling ourselves we're different. That we protect our own. That we have lines we don't cross. Well, that little girl is one of ours, whether you see it or not. She's the daughter of a man who gave me everything. And if we let her disappear because it's bad for business, then we're no different than the Kovalenkos. We're just better dressed. Vincent studied Adrian's face for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. You really going to do this alone? I have to. If the family gets involved, this becomes a gang war. But if I move as a private citizen settling a personal debt, the Kovalenkos might accept it as an isolated incident. Or they might kill you and dump your body in the river, Fish said flatly. Maybe. But I've already made my choice. There was a long silence. Finally, Vincent stood. Then we're going to have to make ours. Boys, out. I need to talk to Adrian alone. The others filed out, Marco casting one last worried look before closing the door. Vincent walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Your father built this organization on fear and violence. When you took over, you changed it, made it smarter, cleaner. I've watched you become a leader worth following, he turned to face Adrian. But leaders don't survive suicide missions. I'm not on a suicide mission. I'm settling a debt. Same thing, if you're not careful, Vincent pulled out his phone. You want to do this alone?
Fine.
But you're going to be smart about it. Rosa's making contact with the Reeveses.
Good.
When she gets you inside, you'll need backup waiting nearby. Not for the fight, for the extraction. Vincent. I'm not arguing, Adrian. You want to play hero, that's your choice. But you're not leaving that little girl's safety to chance. The old man's eyes were hard. We protect our own. You said it yourself. Well, you're one of ours too. Adrian felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The Kovalenkos are going to come for you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But this photograph. Vincent gestured to the table. That's not a warning. That's a promise. After Vincent left, Adrian stood alone in his penthouse, looking at the photograph one more time. Then he burned it in his kitchen sink and watched the ashes swirl down the drain. Let them come, he thought. Let them all come. He had a little girl to save. Rosa called 3 days later with news that made Adrian's pulse quicken. They invited me over, she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This Saturday afternoon. They want to do the interview for the community newsletter. Susan even asked if I could bring my tres leches cake. Saturday, Adrian repeated, his mind already racing through logistics. That gives us 2 days to prepare. Did they seem suspicious? Not at all. Susan was delighted, said they love sharing their story with people who appreciate the sacred work of foster care. Rosa's tone dripped with disgust. She talks about Lily like she's a rescue puppy they rehabilitated. Adrian was in his car within the hour, driving to a location Marco had secured, a vacant office space 2 blocks from the Reeves house. Inside, Blueprints of the neighborhood were spread across a folding table. Vincent stood studying them, glasses perched on his nose. The house has a security system, Vincent said without preamble. Basic, but functional. Cameras on the front and back doors. Motion sensors on the ground floor windows. Rosa goes in through the front door as a guest, Adrian said. No alarms there.
Right.
The interview will probably happen in the living room or kitchen. Both ground floor, both visible from outside. Our problem is getting Lily out without triggering anything. Marco pointed to the blueprints. Back door leads to a small garden, then an alley. If Rosa can get Lily to the back of the house, you can meet her there. But you'll need to disable the camera first. Or loop the feed, Fish suggested. He'd been uncharacteristically quiet until now. Give me 15 minutes with their system, and I can make it show an empty garden while you walk right through. Adrian looked at him. I thought you wanted no part of this. Fish shrugged. Vincent made a good point. You're one of ours. Besides, I hate child traffickers more than I hate stupid rescue missions. So, I'm in. Over the next 2 days, they refined the plan with the precision of a surgical strike. Fish would hack into the security system remotely, having already identified the company and model through public records. Rosa would arrive at 2 p.m. with her cake and her interview questions, keeping the Reeveses occupied in the front of the house. At 2:30, she'd ask to use the bathroom and get lost on her way back, allowing her to find Lily. The girl would be the wild card. If she was locked in her room, if she didn't trust Rosa, if she panicked, any of those could ruin everything. She'll remember me, Rosa insisted when Adrian voiced his concerns. I used to give her extra marshmallows. Kids don't forget kindness. Saturday arrived with cruel sunshine, the kind of perfect weather that belonged in insurance commercials, not rescue operations. Adrian parked his car in the alley behind a Reeves house at 1:45 p.m., wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap. Vincent sat in a second vehicle at the end of the block, watching the front. Marco and Fish were in a surveillance van 3 streets over, computers glowing in the darkness. Camera loop ready, Fish's voice crackled through Adrian's earpiece. You've got a 15-minute window starting at 2:30. After that, the system might flag the repeat pattern. Understood. At 2:03, Rosa's old sedan pulled up to the front of the house. Adrian watched through binoculars as she emerged carrying a covered cake dish, her silver hair bright in the sun. She looked like someone's grandmother, not the linchpin of a rescue operation. Susan Reeves opened the door, all smiles and welcome. They disappeared inside. The wait was excruciating. Adrian checked his watch every 30 seconds, each minute crawling past like an hour. At 2:28, his phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Bathroom excuse in 2 minutes. Fish, start the loop, Adrian whispered. Loop active. Clocks ticking. At exactly 2:30, Adrian moved. The back gate was unlocked, a small mercy. He slipped into the garden, staying low behind a row of overgrown hydrangeas. The back door was 15 feet away. Through the window, he could see a kitchen. Empty. His earpiece crackled. Adrian, we have a problem, Vincent's voice was tense. Black SUV just pulled up across the street. 2 men inside. They're watching the house. Adrian's blood ran cold. Kovalenko's. Probably. They're not moving, just observing. Then we stick to the plan. We're committed now. Inside the house, Rosa would be climbing the stairs, her heart probably hammering. Finding Lily's room. Explaining quickly, quietly. Hoping the girl understood. The minutes stretched. 2:33, 2:35. Where were they? Then the back door opened. Rosa appeared first, her face pale but determined. Behind her, gripping her hand with white knuckles, was Lily Harris. The girl looked smaller than she had in the restaurant. Thinner. Her yellow dress was gone, replaced by jeans and a too large sweater. But her eyes, those were Harris's eyes. Alert. Intelligent. Scared but fighting it. She saw Adrian and froze. It's okay, Rosa whispered. This is the friend I told you about. He knew your daddy. Adrian removed his cap, letting Lily see his face clearly. He knelt down to her level, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Your dad taught me a signal once," he said softly. "A fork and a spoon in an X. 2 napkin drops. I saw you use it at the restaurant. That was very brave." Lily's eyes widened with recognition. "You're the man with gray eyes. From Daddy's stories." The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. "Yeah," he managed. "That's me. And I'm going to take you somewhere safe now. But we have to move fast and stay quiet."
Can you do that?
She nodded, her small jaw set with determination that reminded him so much of Harris it hurt. "Boss, the SUV just killed its engine," Vincent warned. "They might be preparing to move." "We're leaving now." Adrian scooped Lily up. She weighed almost nothing, and turned to Rosa. "Get back inside. Act normal. Don't let them know anything's wrong for as long as you can." Rosa's eyes were wet. She touched Lily's cheek once, gently. "Be safe, Mija." Then she was gone, back through the door. Adrian ran. Through the garden, through the gate, into the alley where his car waited. He buckled Lily into the back seat, threw a blanket over her. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." He started the engine just as his earpiece exploded with Vincent's voice. "Adrian, they're coming. The SUV's moving. They're heading toward the alley." Adrian floored it, tires screaming as he shot out of the alley onto a side street. In his rearview mirror, the black SUV appeared, turning hard to follow. Beside him, hidden under the blanket, Lily Harris stayed perfectly silent. And the chase began. Adrian's Audi shot through residential streets at 60 miles per hour, the black SUV gaining behind them. He ran a stop sign, swerved around a mail truck, his mind calculating trajectories and escape routes with the cold precision that had kept him alive for 2 decades. "Vincent, I've got a tail," he said through gritted teeth. "Heavy pursuit. They're not backing off. Lead them away from populated areas. We can't risk civilians." "Working on it." In the back seat, Lily was still hidden under the blanket, silent as death. But Adrian could see her small form trembling. "Lily," he said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I need you to stay down and stay quiet no matter what happens. Can you do that for me?" A tiny voice emerged from under the blanket. "Are they going to hurt us?" "Not if I can help it." The SUV rammed him from behind. Metal shrieked, and the Audi fishtailed. Adrian corrected smoothly, muscle memory taking over. These weren't professionals. Professionals would have shot out his tires already. These were enforcers, relying on intimidation and brute force. That gave him an advantage. He yanked the wheel hard right, diving into a narrow alley between 2 warehouses. The SUV followed, but its wider frame clipped a dumpster, slowing it down. Adrian accelerated, bursting out the other side into.
His heart sank.
A dead end. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire, blocking off an abandoned industrial lot.
"No, no, no," I whispered.
The SUV's engine growled behind him, closing in. Adrian slammed on the brakes, spinning the wheel, putting his car between the fence and the approaching vehicle. He reached for his gun. Then he saw it. 50 yards to his left, partially hidden by overgrown weeds, St. Michael's Church. The old stone building Harris had taken him to once, years ago, when Adrian had been drowning in guilt over a deal gone wrong. "Sometimes you need sanctuary," Harris had said. "Not from the law. From yourself." The church had been scheduled for demolition for years, but kept getting bureaucratic delays. It sat abandoned now, forgotten by the city.
"Perfect."
"Change of plans," Adrian muttered. He threw the car into reverse, backing toward a gap in the fence he'd spotted, a section that had been cut away, probably by squatters or scrappers. The SUV screeched to a stop. 2 men emerged, both large, both armed with handguns. One of them Adrian recognized from old surveillance photos, Viktor Sokolov, one of Kozlov's personal enforcers. "Moretti,"
Viktor shouted.
"Step out of the car. Give us the girl. Nobody has to die today." Adrian opened his door slowly, hands visible, his gun still holstered. You broke into my home.
You threatened me.
And now you want me to just hand over a child? He shook his head. That's not how this works. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Be smart. Smart would have been staying out of this. Adrian's voice dropped. But here's the thing about debts, Victor. Some of them matter more than being smart. He dove back into the car, started the engine, and reversed hard through the gap in the fence. The cut metal scraped his doors. Vincent was going to kill him, but the Audi fit through. Barely.
Victor fired.
The back window exploded in a shower of safety glass. Lily screamed. Stay down. Adrian floored it across the overgrown lot toward the church, praying the ground was solid enough. The Audi bounced over concrete chunks and weeds, suspension complaining. Behind them, Victor and his partner were on foot now, running, firing shots that went wide. Adrian skidded to a stop at the church's side entrance. He grabbed Lily, still wrapped in the blanket, and ran. The church door was chained, but the chain was rusted. One solid kick broke it free. Adrian shouldered through into darkness that smelled of mold and old incense. He set Lily down gently. Are you hurt? She shook her head, her face pale, eyes huge.
I'm scared.
Me too, Adrian admitted. But we're going to be okay. I promise. Outside, he could hear Victor and his partner arguing. They'd seen where Adrian had gone but weren't eager to follow into an unfamiliar building where he might have tactical advantage. Adrian pulled out his phone. No signal. The old stone walls were too thick. His earpiece was dead too, knocked out when they'd clipped the dumpster. They were alone. He moved to a broken stained glass window, peering out carefully. The two enforcers had taken cover behind his car, talking on a radio. Calling for backup, probably. Or waiting for orders from Kozlov. Mr. Gray Eyes? Lily's voice was small in the darkness. Adrian turned. She stood in a shaft of colored light from the broken window, looking impossibly young and impossibly brave. My daddy told me stories about you, she said. He said you were someone who did bad things but was trying to be good. He said that's harder than always being good because you have to choose it every day. Adrian's throat tightened. Your dad was a wise man. Are you choosing to be good now? Even though it's dangerous? He thought about his penthouse, his empire, the peace he'd carefully maintained for 20 years. Thought about the war this might start, the lives it might cost. Thought about Vincent's warning and Marco's worry, and every logical reason to walk away. Then he looked at Lily Harris, standing in the ruins of a church her father had shown him, and knew there was only one answer. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm chosen. She smiled, small but real.
Good.
Daddy said you would if you ever got the chance. Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed. One bar of signal, flickering. A text from Vincent. Kozlov himself is coming. ETA 10 minutes.
Get out now.
Adrian looked at Lily, then at the enforcers outside, then at the crumbling church around them. 10 minutes to figure out how to save a little girl from the man who'd wanted him dead for 27 years. He'd faced worse odds. Barely. Lily, he said, kneeling down. I need you to tell me everything you remember about the house where they kept you. Every detail. Because we're not running anymore. Her eyes widened. What are we doing? Adrian's smile was cold and sharp. We're fighting back. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens began to wail. But these weren't police sirens. They were private security, Kovalenko's men coming in force. And Adrian Moretti, for the first time in years, felt truly alive. The sirens grew louder, then stopped. Adrian counted 4 vehicles through the broken window, more than he'd expected. Kozlov wasn't taking chances. Listen to me carefully, Adrian whispered to Lily, pulling her deeper into the church's shadows. There's a basement entrance near the altar. Old coal chute from when they heated this place. It leads to tunnels that connect to the buildings next door. Your dad showed them to me once. Why would Daddy show you that? Because he knew someday I might need sanctuary. Adrian pressed his phone into her small hands. When I tell you to run, you go down there. Follow the tunnel east, toward the sunrise. It'll take you to an old bakery. Call the number saved as Vincent. Tell him where you are. He'll come get you. What about you? Adrian checked his gun 9 rounds. Not enough for a firefight, but enough to buy time. I'm going to make sure they follow me, not you. Lily's fingers tightened on the phone. You're going to die. Maybe, he met her eyes. Harris's eyes. But your dad died protecting people. If that's how my story ends too, I can live with it. Or not live with it. I guess he tried to smile. Bad joke. Saw the Mr. Gray eyes. Yeah. Thank you for keeping your word. Something in Adrian's chest cracked open. He touched her cheek gently. Thank your dad. He's the one who taught me how. Outside, a megaphone crackled to life. Moretti. This is Detective Kozlov. You're surrounded. Send out the girl, and we can end this peacefully. Adrian moved to the window. Kozlov stood behind an armored SUV, older now but still recognizable. Gray-haired, hard-faced, the kind of corrupt that had calcified into bone. You killed Harris. Adrian shouted back. You and your Kovalenko friends. And now you're trafficking his daughter? Kozlov's smile was visible even at this distance. Harris was a sanctimonious fool who couldn't accept how the world really works. He got what he deserved. And that girl? She's worth $50,000 to the right buyer overseas. Did you really think you could play hero and walk away? Adrian's hand tightened on his gun. Every instinct screamed to go out there, to end Kozlov the way he should have been ended decades ago. Then Lily touched his arm. Don't. Daddy wouldn't want you to. She was right. Harris had spent his life trying to do things the right way, even when it was harder, even when it cost him everything. Adrian took a breath and made his choice. Lily, run.
Now.
She disappeared into the darkness, like a ghost. Adrian waited 10 seconds, then fired 2 shots through the window, not at anyone, just noise to draw attention. He ran toward the front of the church, boots echoing on stone, making himself the target. Kozlov's men opened fire. Bullets shattered the remaining stained glass, chipped ancient stone, turned the altar into splinters. Adrian dove behind a collapsed pew, firing back, making them think he was pinned down. From his new position, he could see the coal chute entrance. Empty. Lily was gone. Relief flooded through him so intensely it almost hurt. Vicente, he shouted into the darkness, praying his voice would carry through the stone. The package is delivered. Then he stood up, hands raised, gun dangling from one finger. Kozlov, you want me? Come get me. The girl's gone. You lost. The shooting stopped. Kozlov emerged from cover, flanked by 4 men. They approached the church entrance cautiously. Where is she, Moretti? Somewhere you'll never find her. Somewhere safe, with people who actually give a damn, Adrian smiled. You failed. Harris's daughter is free. And you? You just committed kidnapping, attempted murder, and human trafficking in front of a dozen witnesses. What witnesses? Kozlov laughed. My men? They'll say whatever I tell them to. Not them. Adrian pointed upward. Kozlov followed his gaze to the church steeple, where a small camera was mounted, new, digital, completely out of place in the old building. Fish installed that 3 days ago, Adrian said quietly. Everything that happened here, your confession about Harris, your admission about the trafficking, all of it, went live to 3 separate servers, including one at the FBI field office downtown. Kozlov's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Adrian's smile widened. You wanted to know if I was still the kid you tried to kill 27 years ago. The one Harris saved. Here's your answer. I'm not. I'm something better. I'm the man he believed I could be. The sound of actual police sirens, real ones this time, began to wail in the distance. Kozlov's hand moved toward his gun, but his men were already backing away, realizing the trap they'd walked into. One of them was already on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. It's over, Kozlov, Adrian said. You lost the moment you touched that little girl. 3 weeks later, Adrian sat in Rose's cafe, drinking coffee that tasted like hope for the first time in years. The morning news played on the small TV above the counter. Detective Sergei Kozlov and 14 members of the Kovalenko organization arrested in connection with an international trafficking ring. New Beginnings Foundation shut down. 17 children recovered and returned to families. The newscaster didn't mention Adrian's name. Vincent had made sure of that. Rosa set down a plate of tres leches cake. You look different. How so? Lighter. Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. Adrian smiled. Maybe I have. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Eleanor Harris wants to meet you. If you're willing.
He was.
2 hours later, he stood in a nursing home room, facing an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Eleanor Harris had kind eyes, the same eyes her son and granddaughter shared. Mr. Moretti, she said softly, I don't have words to thank you. You don't need to. I owed your son everything. He spoke of you, you know, before he died. Said you were proof that people could change if someone gave them a reason. Her weathered hand gripped his. Lily's with me now. Real custody, real paperwork. She's safe. That's all that matters. Eleanor smiled. She drew you something. Asked me to give it to you. She handed him a piece of paper. Adrian unfolded it carefully. The drawing showed a man and a little girl standing in front of a church. The man had gray eyes, represented by silver crayon, and was smiling. Above them, a sun shone brightly, and in the corner, a figure that looked like Harris stood among clouds, also smiling. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, Thank you for choosing good, Mr. Gray Eyes. Daddy would be proud. Love, Lily. Adrian's vision blurred. He folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. 1 month later, Adrian Moretti walked the city streets alone, no bodyguards, no entourage. He stopped at St. Michael's Church. The city had fast-tracked its restoration after what happened there. The broken windows were being replaced with new stained glass. He stepped inside, breathing in sawdust and possibility. Thought I'd find you here. He turned. Vincent stood in the doorway, looking older, but somehow lighter too. The family's been quiet without you running everything, Vincent said. They respect the choice you made. Some of them are even inspired by it.
Good.
Maybe we can actually be what we've always pretended to be. Vincent nodded. Maybe. The Kovalenkos are finished in this city. Their networks collapsed. You did that. Harris did that. I just finished what he started. As they left the church together, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not the fragile peace of negotiated truces and careful balance, but the real kind. The kind earned through sacrifice and kept promises. His phone buzzed one last time. A photo from Rosa. Lily, smiling, holding up a drawing of a gray-eyed man standing in sunlight. Adrian Moretti smiled back at the image and walked into the city he'd spent 20 years ruling and 1 month learning to truly protect. The Mafia boss who saw a signal in a restaurant. The man who chose to be good when it would have been easier to walk away. The proof that debts paid in full could set you free.
The end.